Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. Recently, I've completed a read-through of Våluspá in Old Norse, explaining each stanza as I go, but I based that read-through on the manuscript called the Codex Regius, or Konungsbók, which is older than another manuscript that contains a version of Våluspá. Now, this manuscript is Hauksbók in Old Norse, Hauksbók in modern Icelandic, named for its patron and one of its scribes, a man named Helker Erlendsson, who died in 1334. Hauksbók was probably composed in the first decade of the 1300s. Now, the version of Våluspá in Hauksbók is actually shorter than the version in the Codex Regius. It leaves out particularly the big middle part between the creation and Ragnarok, where the Volva turns to Odin, says, I know where you hid your eye, I know how Baldur died, I know the names of the Valkyries, that sort of thing. That's not there in the Hauksbók version. But it does include some stanzas that are not in the Codex Regius, and so in this video I'm going to talk about those. So after the stanza where she mentions Heimdallr hiding his hljóð, probably his hearing or ear, and the muddy water where Odin hid his ved, his pledge, his eye, she skips, as I said, right over all the part where she talks about she knows where that eye is and about the death of Baldur, and we get this stanza. Folk no valla, vígbon snúa, heldur voru harðgjör hopt or þormum. Þar situr Sigun, þauki sínum ver vel glíuð, vitu þeir enn eða what? And it's actually a little bit difficult to figure out what's going on here. So vígbond is presumably the subject. This could be war or battle chains, bond, but that chains word is often used to mean gods, as I've mentioned, for example, in my video about Norse worship. So this could actually be the gods. So then the gods, and then knå, this is a filler word, as I've also discussed in previous videos about Våluspá. But it's not in the form we'd expect if bond, plural, is the subject, knå is the first or third person singular form. We'd expect knegu, but you do occasionally see knå in the plural in later texts. So I'm just gonna take that as a filler word with vígbond, and then the verb snúa is to change. Its basic meaning is to turn, but here the meaning seems to be change. So then the gods change Voli. Now this is not the Voli who avenges Baldur. This is Voli, one of the names of one of Loki's children. The chains, hoft, were rather hard made, heldur harðgjör, out of intestines, or thormum. And this matches the story Snorri tells us that one of Loki's sons was turned into a wolf to punish him, and then the intestines of that son or another son were used to chain Loki up. But Våluspá in Hauksbók does not clarify what Loki's being punished for. But then we also have this half a stanza that is in the Codex Regius, although in a different context. There, Sigyn sits, though she's not well cheered about her husband, do you know yet, or what? And then there is another stanza that seems perhaps only half complete in the Codex Regius, but that is whole in Hauksbók, although it has the first two couplets reversed. Skelfur Yggdrasils askar standandi it aldna trä en jotun losnar. Hræðask allir og helvegum, óður sortar þann sevi of gloipir. Now that first half, like I said, is in the Codex Regius, although without the second half, and that first half has the order of the couplets reversed. So here we have Yggdrasil's ask shakes standing, the old tree groans, and the giant is freed. Then we get new stuff. All, probably all men, this is masculine nominative plural, are afraid on hell roads, helvegum. Before Surtur's kinsman, Surtar Sevi, that's a kenning for fire, Gloiper swallows Than, him or it. Than is masculine accused of singular. Presumably this refers back to Askar, which is masculine, the ash tree. So before Surtur's fire consumes Yggdrasil, everyone on the hell roads, everyone who is dead or dying perhaps, or everyone who is mortal by extension, will be terrified. Another stanza unique to the Hauksbók version is between Vidar's fight with Fenrir and Thor's fight with Jormungandr. We get this extra stanza. Gin loft yfir lindi jarðar gapa yx kjaftar orms I hæðum. Mun Óðinsson ormi möta vargs at dauða Vidars niðja. All right, lindi jarðar, belt of the earth, that means Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Yawns or gapes gin over the sky, yfir loft, because it's so huge. The terrifying serpent's yx orms jaws, kjaftar, gape in the heights. Odin's son will meet the worm, mun möta ormi, at the monster's death, at dauðavax, at, I think probably this is genitive singular again, at the death of, being taken from the previous line, at the death of Vidar's kinsman, which could be any number of these gods who are dying left and right at Ragnarok. The last word in the 7th line is actually not clear. If you look at the manuscript, I mean, I obviously don't have Hauksbók in one of my pockets here or something, but you can get good facsimiles of most of these manuscripts online now, and there is one of Hauksbók on hanrit.is, so I went looking at it directly to see what I thought. It's impossible to even read this stanza. It's so darkened by now. But people are not 100% clear of the word. The last word in the 7th line is dauða, because the bottom of page 20v of this manuscript is so hard to read. But apparently earlier readers in the 1600s, 1700s could identify at least the letters DA. And then famously, Hauksbók has a second to last stanza between the stanza about Gimle, the hall where humans are going to live after Ragnarok, and the stanza about Nidhogr, the evil dragon that's going to survive Ragnarok. We get this stanza. Þó kemur hinriki at regindomi, oflugur ofan sá Olu ræður. Then comes the mighty to God judgment, or mighty judgment, or simply goddom, deity. A mighty one, oflugur, from above, that one who rules all. And this has typically been taken as a reference to Jesus Christ that has been sandwiched in here. After Ragnarok, the death of the old gods, Jesus, who rules all, a mighty one from above, is going to come down and become, enter into his goddom, his regendomr. I don't know. I definitely think that this is not part of the original composition of Våluspá. I do think that if there's any stanza that is likely to be late, it is that one. And I think it's interesting if you look at the context of Hauksbók right around Våluspá. Right before it is something called Afsagnir fyrir samnöyti við bansetta. Excuses for interacting with the excommunicated. It's some church law about, for example, if your spouse is excommunicated, to what extent can you communicate with them, that sort of thing. Which is interesting, because obviously this is being jammed into a pretty explicitly Christian context, and one might think about excommunication in relation to an interest in pagan things. And right after Våluspá and Hauksbók is Trojumanna saga, which is the Old Norse medieval version of the fall of Troy. It's actually kind of an interesting thing to read in and of itself. But the whole context of the manuscript is just sort of old lore, whether Christian or classical or medieval Norse, all kind of jammed together. And it's instructive to remember that probably Haukr's interest in this was antiquarian and might have even connected to the basically BS notion that Snorri also comes up with in the beginning of his prose edda, that the Norse gods are somehow the Trojans. That may be why Våluspá is placed right there before Trojumanna saga, which tells about the fall of Troy. But I think it's important to remember, again, unlike in the Codex Regius, where you have all these poems about the pagan gods together, and that is the context here is someone who's just interested in antiquity, might not be above copying some stanzas that might not be as genuine, might be a little bit later. I'm not saying that Hauksbók actually composed that stanza or any of the others. There's some complications in them that suggest that this probably isn't the work of just whoever wrote this, but that in the meantime, somewhere in the decades between, or more than a century between the exemplar of the Codex Regius being composed and the Hauksbók being composed, that other people might have worked on Våluspá. There might have been other stanzas that had been added in the meantime by other people. It's also possible that for centuries there had been multiple different versions of Våluspá, right? I mean, even Snorri, when he quotes Våluspá, doesn't always quote the words exactly like in either of the other manuscripts. Sometimes we actually find sagas in very short versions and also in long versions. Interestingly, Hauksbók is often one where we find shorter versions, like of Erik Saga Rauða. And that's not so unfamiliar to us today. Something like American Pie exists in a radio edit and in, a long self-indulgent version. Something like Våluspá could have two, and there's nothing to say that Våluspá necessarily had to have been composed by one person in, say, the late 900s and then remained unchanged, forever. I think even the Koningsbók version probably isn't exactly a transcript of whatever the quote-unquote original composer had intended. But it's all an interesting look at how Norse poetry, poetry of any culture that's more or less oral-based, comes together. And I hope that you've enjoyed these reviews of both Våluspá in the Codex Regius and in Hauksbók. And I hope that you'll check out my translation of Våluspá in my translation of the Poetic Edda, as well as my Patreon, which helps me continue to make these videos for free to help inform the internet from beautiful places in my Rocky Mountain homeland of Wyoming and Colorado. For now, from beautiful Colorado, as the sun rises in the Front Range, I'm wishing you all the best.